Yes, you might be approaching burnout or you are burned out, but you can get out of it. And hopefully you don't have to go through what I did. And that's the whole idea. I don't want anybody going through what I did. I really wish I would have worked with a therapist back then because it probably would have expedited some things and maybe get me some more clarity on some things. A lot of it was ego. I should have delegated more. I should have not taken on as much as I did.
Welcome to the Learn It All podcast, the show for today's leaders who want to get ahead and stay ahead because we believe great leaders aren't born or made, they're always in the making. I'm Damon Lemby, two-time best-selling author and CEO of Learn It, a live learning platform that has helped upskill over 2 million people. Burnout is a choice. That is exactly what today's guest, Michael Levitt, believes. And yes, he knows how controversial that sounds. But after surviving a heart attack at 40, losing his job, his house, and nearly everything else, Michael faced the hard truth that the life that almost killed him was his choice. I'm really excited about our conversation today. Michael and I will be jumping into why sleep might be your most powerful business strategy, how financial pressure, not workload, is quietly crushing your team, how to stop burning out your top performers by setting better boundaries, and why learning, belonging, and curiosity are your best retention tools. So Michael, you believe that burnout is a choice. That's a pretty bold statement, which I'm sure some people don't agree with. But where does that belief come from?
Well, I got to be really careful if I say that in person because otherwise I might get a black eye or even worse because no one would identify as saying, I chose to burn out. And that's not what it really means. We make decisions, choices, we have behaviors, habits, thoughts, beliefs. And those all working together can create the scenarios for us that lead us down that path of prolonged stress. And prolonged stress is what turns into burnout. So when you make the choice of going to work for a company that's going to make you work crazy hours, have you constantly connected with your iBinky? That's my brother's nickname for my iPhone because I'm always on it, like a baby with the pacifiers. Like, put down your iBinky. One time, he's like, hand me your iBinky. I'm like, okay. So I handed it to him. Now I have a work phone, a personal phone, so I just grabbed the other phone and started playing on it. But anyway, I digress. But the challenge is when you choose to work in that type of situation, that can lead to prolonged stress. You might have chose that company because it paid you the money for you to live where you wanted to live or cover the costs and expenses that you have, whether it's rent, mortgage, car payment, you're putting your children through private school, maybe you're putting your spouse through college. Who knows? There's all kinds of choices that we make. But when we make those choices, there are factors involved. And financial stress, in my personal opinion, is probably one of the worst, and I can get into that in a minute. But I think that's what the burnout as a choice really comes from, is we make choices and decisions in our lives, and those choices and decisions can lead us into stressful situations. And if we don't address the stress that come in to those situations, then that's when we have the opportunity to burn out.
And so burnout it could be a blanket term. People could, I'm burning out, let's start off with what is the definition of burnout? And even more so, how is it different than, let's say, depression?
Yeah, as somebody that has dealt with both of those in my life, I have a pretty interesting insight on both of them. But I'll borrow the definition from the World Health Organization, because back in 2018, before they got really busy with a pandemic that we all had to deal with, they actually had issued what they call an ICD code. Now, for those that aren't in health, ICD codes are basically go into a disease registry. So they assigned burnout this code. They did not classify it as a disease, though. They declared it as an occupational work phenomenon because it tends to happen mostly in work. Now, you could be a caregiver and burnout, but it's pretty much focused in a work setting. And what it comes from unaddressed prolonged stress, where you're overwhelmed by life, you're not able to meet the demands of life, you're mentally, physically, emotionally drained, and you're just going through the motions to get things done. Now, the biggest difference, again, from my perspective, between being burned out, which I've had the lovely experience of that, in clinical depression, which I've also dealt with in my life, the biggest difference of the two, and they're very, very similar, is when you're clinically depressed, you more or less can get to the point where you are unable to go to work. You are unable to do things. You could be curled up in a ball on a bed or just emotionally crying it just uncontrollably out of nowhere. Where with burnout, even if you're wiped out and drained and things like that, somehow might be muscle memory or just autopilot mode, you still go on and continue to do things. But it's neither one of them are experiences that you want to deal with if you can at all avoid them.
And speaking of avoid them, I mean, you've been really open. You went through 369 days of basically hell, and you've been open about that, from having a heart attack to losing your job, your home, even your car. Um, what did that really teach you about burnout, and how has that helped really kind of get you into the work that you're in now?
Yeah, for me, it was the ultimate wake up call because I was 40 years old when I had the cardiac event. And when my cardiologist that came in to put the stents in my left anterior descending artery, which has a nickname in cardiology world, it's called the Widowmaker.
Yeah.
Usually, when people have blockages in that artery and they have a cardiac event or heart attack, they are viewed instead of seen. And I was very fortunate. But he came in, and I had not met him yet. There was another cardiologist that I worked with in the hospital because I was in the hospital for about a week, and they were able to, get the surgery. So he came in. First time I ever met him. He didn't say, "Good morning, I'm Dr. Morrissey. I'm going to be doing the procedure today." He came in. He was looking at a clipboard, looked at it, looked down at me, and leaned in and goes, "You should be dead right now." And
What did that make you feel like? I mean, what did you think? That were you just in complete shock, or you're like, oh yeah,
my first wife and my mom were to the right of me. I looked at him, and I was working in healthcare at the time, and I'm a little warped. So I looked at him. I said, "I see you skipped bedside manner class in medical school." He started laughing. I started laughing. They're crying their eyes out. And he's like, "Okay, okay, I'm Dr. Morrissey and this and this. Like, you're very fortunate." It's like, "Yeah, I'm aware of that." He said, "Here's looking at it, we might need 3 stents, but we're probably gonna be able to get away with 2. I won't know until I get in there and kinda can look and see where the blockages are." I'm like, "Gotcha." Said, the procedure won't take too long." I'm like, "All right." So got it done. I was released the next day. And then I was, between the time of having the heart attack and then losing the job, I had 17 weeks off because I had a short-term disability policy through work, thankfully, which allowed me to get most of my pay at that time and recover. So I had that 17 weeks, and I went from this constantly doing, just working all these hours, constantly on the go, doing, to physically not being able to do a whole lot for like the first month. At 2 p.m., you could set the atomic clock could have set the time to this. At 2 p.m., I had to take a nap, period, full stop. My body was like, kind of like when you have that 30-second warning and you have to use the washroom kind of thing. It was more like a 2-minute warning. It's like, I got to go lay down, and because otherwise I'm going to pass out right here. And it was basically a combination of just healing from the procedure, and also one of the medications that they had me on had, that side effect where it was just, knocking me out. So, the doctors thankfully said, "Well, we're going to take that off and we'll just monitor things, and hopefully you won't have to go back on it." So thankfully I never did. But during that time, I did a lot of reflection because I'm like, okay, yeah, and I'm thankful for this. And I really wish I would have worked with a therapist back then, because it probably would have expedited some things and maybe get me some more clarity on some things. But somehow, miraculously, I approached the basically post mortem. I mean, it's not the right term of what happened to me, but I did it with the curiosity of a 5-year-old version of me.
I like that.
Instead of beating myself up, already was beaten up pretty good, not knowing what was going to come with the job loss and the car repo and the home foreclosure. But I was, going through the cardiac event and all of that, and the years that built up to that. I needed to kind of look at that and go, "All right, why did I do the things I did? What was I trying to prove? Who was I trying to impress? what was my goals? What did I wanna do? A lot of it was ego. I wanted to be viewed as a villain, or excuse me, a pillar in the community, and for bringing in this brand new healthcare organization that had all of these services in an area that never had access to them before, bringing in new doctors, growing the community. It was, all these things inherently not wrong, but how I went about it was, I should have delegated more. I should have not taken on as much as I did, you know, much slower pace, tortoise and the hare, who wins that race? The turtle did. So I didn't need to be the rabbit and running all around because I get, verbally assaulted by a cardiologist. But it was just one of those things where during that 4 months off, I was able to kind of do a deep dive of, okay, why was this important to me? And then going forward, how am I going to do things? What am I going to do about this? And that's an ongoing thing. That was 2009. So it's been quite a while since that happened. I still do that. I still kind of think, what do I want to do? We talked in the pre-show about business and the current state of things and all of that. And, for me, it's like, okay, this is the reality of it. All right. What can I do to mitigate this to make sure that I continue doing the things I want to do, have the impact that I want to have, and all of that? So it, from there, going through all of that, going back into healthcare, my parents wanted to have me committed, by the way, after that. I said, yeah, I'm going back into healthcare. I said, are you nuts? That nearly killed you. Why are you going back? And I said, because I'm going to do it better this time. And I did. And left that industry when this organization was getting to the point where it's like, it's time to pull the parachute string and fly out of this plane and get into the work that I'm doing now, because I saw years ago, long before the pandemic, that burnout was a huge problem, and I needed to bring awareness to people about it, and hopefully connect with someone or have them at least recognize the idea that, yes, you might be approaching burnout or you are burned out, but you can get out of it. You can recover from it. And hopefully you don't have to go through what I did. And that's the whole idea. I don't want anybody going through what I did in a year. That was not fun. But it sounds weird. I'm thankful it happened for me because it changed the temperature on and direction, quite frankly, of how I approach life. And it was more of a blessing than a curse.
How do you think you were able to look at it through the lens of curiosity instead of beating yourself up over it? And the second question, going back to 2009, what was the first big change that you made right off the bat?
Yeah, for the curiosity side of things, and this was something, again, I'm very thankful that I didn't, because quite frankly, knowing my ancestors and how people think and react to things, it could have been very easy for me to blame the company, blame the food companies, blame the banks.
Victim mindset.
Yeah. And I wasn't going to go down that road. I'm like, that doesn't change anything. All that does is make me feel even worse. It's like, drinking poison and hoping somebody else dies. It's the same analogy. That's what victimhood is. I'm a very open, caring person, but when people come at me with a victim mentality, I go, oh, okay, wait a minute. Let's change how you see this a little bit. Let's maybe look at this in a different lens, because it's not going to change anything unless it motivates you to make better choices. Then okay. But yeah, I didn't want to go down that road. So, I looked at it. It's like, okay, let's kind of peel back, because I got time, because I knew I had, time off and really couldn't work or do anything else. So I thought, well, how do I want to approach this? And I just decided, okay, let's peel this back. What were all the things that led up to this? All the ingredients. And I looked at them like, why did you make those food choices? Well, because you were working so many hours, you didn't allocate time to do meal prep or eat the right foods. It's like breakfast, lunch, and dinner, pretty much sitting in your car, talking to a microphone, driving around the corner, paying for it, brown bag. You can kind of guess what kind of food I was eating all the time. And that's going to clog your arteries up real big, or And a lot of people, unfortunately, that's kind of how they operate. So I thought, we're going to change this because I didn't want to go through that again. Having one heart attack was enough, especially one that should have killed me. And it didn't. So I'm like, well, we won that round. Let's take our winnings and go home and not stay at the table. The first shift was when I did finally find a new role. And even before I found it, I'm like, okay, I'm going to establish boundaries around when I work and when I don't, when I'm going to be available via my phone and when I'm not. And when I was interviewing with people, I'd ask them, okay, what's your policy about after hours work? When do you contact me? Excuse me. And when would I be, you know, needed? Okay, in an emergency. Okay, let's define emergency. What does that look like? Get really crystal clear on that. And thankfully, that first role that I took, the CEO of that organization, very intense, very strong, dedicated leader, very cut and dry, black and white, period. But she was spot on. Don't bug me, and I'm not going to bug you after hours unless there's something there. And in my entire time there, I think I only had one text message or text conversation with her after hours. And that was because a storm was coming in the next day. And I just wanted to get clarity. It's like, okay, what? I'm just verifying the protocols on this. If we're going to have people come in or are we going to have people stay home? What should we do? Where's the cutoff line on that? So, she was amazing on that. But that was the biggest thing. It's just establishing boundaries.
I mean, I'm not a doctor, but I'd have to say, I think part of the reason you're still alive is because you didn't take this as a victim mentality. You know what I mean? I mean, because if you had a victim mentality, you might have just said to yourself, "Well, there's nothing I can do to stop this, so this is something that will probably happen again," and you just went on your way. But what you did is, you set up boundaries, you changed your eating habits, all of that. So, I mean, I really admire that. When it comes to burnout, what are some of the key triggers to burnout? I think we've talked about a couple of them already. Financial debt, nutrition. Am I going in the right direction there?
Oh, definitely, definitely. And I just want to piggyback for a second on the comment about not playing the victim, because after the house foreclosure, at that point, I went through and I'm like, okay, I've pretty much survived all of this. Like I don't look how strong I am. I'm like
I love
Superman.
it.
I'm like
Yeah.
Superman. I don't have to change anything. But I didn't choose that mentality because while I like Superman, I like Batman a lot better.
Hey, I
Um,
was Batman as a kid, so there you go.
there you go. So always good to talk with a fellow Cape Crusader. But for me, I didn't want to play the victim. So, uh, so basically, from there, the, and understanding and just going back to that, 17 weeks where I had off, did a lot of research on burnout and actually came across a book because I was like, okay, what is burnout? I mean, I know I had it, but what is it? And Dr. Herbert Friedenberger wrote a book titled Burnout. It was published in 1980. So burnout's not this new thing that came out because of the pandemic. No, and there was clinical research probably in the 70s and maybe even in the 60s on it. So it's been there for a long time. So signs that we seek time and time again, especially when I'm working with individuals or working with teams. Number one, as we talked about, and I'm going to get to the financial thing because, again, why my opinion of why that's so stressful for people. Nutrition is a big thing because food is fuel. What we eat can impact how we feel, our cognitive abilities, inflammation, which is a huge problem with a lot of people that causes other issues. Uh, but the biggest things are, okay, you're not eating right, you're not sleeping well. And that is, if there's a magic pill or bullet and you want to kind of get ahead of burnout or kind of reduce it, the sleep side of thing is really critical because when we get good, deep sleep, that's when we repair the damage that we do to ourselves on a daily basis. Because You can live the healthiest lifestyle. You can run 5Ks every day, eat nothing but kale salad, do everything, protein shakes, you name it. You could live the ideal life. You still are experiencing stress in your life, whether it's physical stress, the air we breathe, foods we eat, information overload, stress about the economy, or, if you get too bought into election cycles or any of that, it takes a toll on you. Or you have relationship issues, or, maybe you're a caregiver, maybe you have a difficult boss, or you name it. There's so many different things we can pick from that can, quote unquote, make our lives hard. But the thing of it is, when you get good, restful sleep, you repair that damage as much as you can. And when you do that, then the next day you're rested, you feel good, you can take on those situations again. And because you're rested, those stressful situations, in many situations, are not as stressful to you. Now, and we all know this, we've all had a bad night's sleep. We wake up the next day, we're not feeling good at all. We're groggy, we ache, we feel body parts we didn't know we had. It's not fun. And then you go into work, or you're dealing with a situation, and it's a stressful situation. And because you're feeling bad, you're already kind of at
Wired up.
edge, wired up. So a little thing can set you off, and you can, erupt like a volcano, or just you internalize it. There's a variety of different things we do, and that just takes a toll. And for people that are under prolonged stress or burning out, typically they're not sleeping well, and that's problematic because that means today's stress didn't get fixed. So it's now piled on to tomorrow's stress, and then the next day, and the next day, and the next week, the next month, maybe the next year. So all of a sudden, you've got this prolonged thing. And what happens is, when we don't get sleep, your body starts to struggle a little bit. And that's when you start getting brain fog, your cognitive abilities start getting impacted. Your relationships suffer. Your interactions with people at work and outside of work aren't as good. You quit going to baseball games if you're a baseball fan. I was a season ticket holder for the Tigers during that time, up to the cardiac event. In 2008, in early 2009, I started missing games, which is, I don't have regrets in my life, but I'm still upset with myself that I was in that situation where I missed games. Because when you're a season ticket holder, especially the way the packages are now, your ticket's paid for, your beer voucher is paid for, your food voucher is paid for, your parking's paid for. You literally show up. That's all you got to do. You don't have to have a nickel on you, unless you burn through all your food and beer vouchers. Then, well, ask a friend. You just literally show up. And I quit going. And I already paid for them. And it was so frustrating when I thought about that. I'm like, all those opportunities, because again, I love, that was one of those things that I love so much, is going to the games and baseball. And I quit going. And that should have been the hugest alarm for me, but I completely ignored it. And that's one of the big things we see with people that are really burned out, is there's sirens, alarms going on in their life. They don't hear it because they're so fatigued and wiped out. So get good sleep. The food side of things, I'm not going to tell you not to eat fast food, but I do suggest that you get crystal clear on what foods are right for you. And I mean specifically for you, because there are certain foods that are good for you, and there are certain foods that are not. And I'm not going into, this type of salad or that. It's the way that we are made up. And I had a food intolerance test taken a few years ago, and it gave me, the foods and color coded. Okay, the ones on the green page, you can eat them all day, your body breaks them down perfectly, no problem. Yellow, depends. Red, probably should avoid them, because again, it causes inflammation. With inflammation, you have body aches, could impact your sleep, also your digestive system, which, the gut to brain situation, haven't researched that enough, but I want to, because there's a huge correlation with your gut basically has a brain. And most people have something in between their ears, and those two communicate quite a bit. And if you're eating foods that are causing acid reflux or other problems, that communication gets broken down, and we all know what broken communication can be like. So when that's happening internally in your body, there's some challenges there. So good sleep, eat well, um, y- relationships, of course, and all that. But the financial stress, the reason why I hammer this one is, and the reason why I feel financial stress is such a big problem is,
Especially right now,
yeah,
right? With
well,
with with
yeah,
with what we're going into in April
yeah,
of 2025.
yeah, it's really, really difficult, and it's been ongoing because we've had obviously the pandemic. A lot of people are impacted by that, and then after things started to ease,
Inflation and tariffs.
inflation, cost of things, eggs, and I'm just not just eggs, but everything, and now there's tariffs, and we're I saw an article this morning, that warned that within next week or the following week, the port of Los Angeles, one of the big shipping ports, there, they are expecting a 35% drop in container ships arriving, starting next week or the week after at the time of this recording. So think about that. So that means there's 35% less ships. Those ships are carrying not just, a box full of pens or whatever. There's thousands of items that are on those ships. So you take a third of what people buy and cut it out. What's going to happen? Well, if you paid attention in econ class, do not take that on a Saturday morning, by the way, if you're not into it, because unless you need a good nap, then, well, you'll be taking it again because you're going to fail the class. But when you have that, the ripple effect of that, of the supply chain, and, thankfully I worked for a supply chain association years ago, so I kind of understand the nooks and crannies a little bit more. But that has a direct impact on what's on the shelves. And then the shelves are going to be a little bit leaner, which means supply and demand. That means there's going to be more demand on the things that are on the shelves right now. And when there's a supply and demand type of situation, what happens is the price of the things that are available will rise. So not only do we have less stuff, the prices are going to increase more. Sorry to break that to you. That's how econ works. And it's going to be really problematic for a lot of people that are struggling and barely able to keep up now. And this is why financial stress is so hard, is because a lot of it, unfortunately, like in this situation, is out of our current control. We can't necessarily control things now. There are some things we can do, but as I like to say, especially if I'm speaking with a team or conferences, and I do this a lot. It's like I'll ask people, okay, show of hands, how many how many people in this room love paying bills? I don't usually see many hands. We don't like paying bills, but we do like the ability that we can pay bills. And when we can't pay our bills, that is very stressful. It's stressful because we feel that we're letting down the other party, whether it's the bank, utility company, cell phone bill,
It's
friends.
embarrassing.
It's embarrassing. And we feel it diminishes us. We and all of a sudden we don't feel like a victim. We like embarrassment is a great
Feel
description.
helpless.
Yeah, and you're like, I don't want to be in this situation. And what's so disappointing is I know a lot of people are working multiple jobs and they still can't cover things. And then, it doesn't help. And I don't pick on generations but it doesn't help when there are generations that will say something, just an off remark. Well, I did this when like completely different economic times. You need to understand that. The percentage of income you need to be able to rent someplace or buy someplace is not what it was even 20 years ago. It's tough out there for a lot of people, and that's just on housing. We haven't talked about healthcare or food or anything else.
What advice do you have for all of us to be proactive on and how we get ahead of this so we don't let us completely stress us out?
Yeah, I've seen some stats, 7 out of 10 Americans are under an extreme amount of debt. And it's bad, and it's and in many cases, okay, maybe the initial debt was okay, you got the car payment, or you've got credit card debt because wanted to buy some nice things. There's nothing wrong with wanting to buy nice things. Maybe you need to buy some nicer things instead of buying the cheap version of it because they tend to last longer. But sometimes it's like, that card is real easy to use. Like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and buy this. And little purchases. It's not like I'm dropping, 1,000 here, 5,000 there and stuff. No, it's the little things that add up, whether it's food delivery or, instead of, walking or getting a ride, using a ride share all the time, it adds up. So the challenge is you have to get a real crystal clear understanding of how you spend your money. Just like how to avoid burnout, how do you spend your time? And a lot of people, they don't really understand how they spend their time because they just kind of go through life on autopilot. So start with a budget. And this is again one of those things where it can beat you up. Please don't let it. I know it, and it's again going back to the embarrassment thing, where you're like, okay, here's what I make. Okay, write that down or take home. Don't use gross. This is what gets deposited in your bank account. Okay, take that. List out all of your expenses, everything, including what you pay for food, your lunches, coffees, all that stuff. Don't beat yourself up. Okay, there's nothing wrong with you wanting to get a latte every morning. I'm not telling you not to. All we're trying to do is get to the reality of the situation. Is it going to sting? Is it going to hurt? You need to cry over it? Please do. You want the financial picture of where you're at, and then you'll see it. And in many cases, you're going to see it and you're not going to like what you see. And you're going to go, okay, what can I do about this? The initial context, well, I'm never going to have a cup of coffee again, or I'm never going to do that. It's like we punish ourselves. And I tell people, haven't you done that enough already? Why don't you're already in a tough situation? Let's make you even more miserable. Now, I don't go about that approach at all. Look for areas where you can save money. Maybe call your utility company. Sometimes they have, plans basically to spread out your payments over time. And I even did this, years ago where, my utility bills were kind of all over the place. So I said, you know what, can we do this? Let's harmonize it. Then we see where things are at the end of the year, and then we can adjust accordingly. I mean, sometimes that's shifting, things down, the pain down there, but we also were proactive. Okay, let's be aware of how much we're spending in energy. Yeah, turn the lights off, kids, when you're not in the room. Okay. Little things like that do add up. And also, what you're spending on other things. And there's ways you can find some savings. And to do that, um, the income side of things, asking your employer for a raise, difficult at best, but the problem is, and we discussed this, there's a lot of businesses there, guess what? They're struggling right now too. So they don't have the revenue stream to pay the raises that they would like to in many cases. So you have to kind of look at it and go, all right, maybe I pick up a part-time role a couple days a week or a couple evenings. Take those funds and allocate it towards your debt if you can. Or you could say, you know what? I'm going to do this, and this is my coffee fund. I'm going to work, a Saturday afternoon at this after school program or this, coding program or whatever. And I'm going to take those funds and I'm going to put it in a separate account that I'm just going to use to pay for my coffee when I go get coffee in the morning, because that's important to me. Awesome. Get better control of how you're spending your money. If your debt is so out of whack, then, I partner with an organization that helps people legally, not one of these, and I'm not knocking them, but it's not your, billboard ad or, 2 o'clock in the afternoon ad, credit counseling kind of things. It's more, using, a legal method to be, maybe negotiate your debt down. And again, if people are interested, they can go to the website and they can get the information on that. But again, financial stress is so hard because it causes you physical, because you feel bad and embarrassed and emotional. And all of a sudden that starts stressing you out physically. Well, if you stress out physically, then all of a sudden mentally you start stressing out, and it just this
Total ripple
domino
effect.
it
Yeah.
just
Domino.
it just dominoes into a bigger mess. But the key thing is avoiding looking at the financial picture other than, most people know what it is. They look at their bank account and they go, okay. I got more month than money. And one company I worked for years ago, years and years ago, paid monthly, which I thought that's cool. You get that big fat deposit every month. That's awesome. Until you realize that there's 31 days in a month.
But then you're overdrafted, covering other bills during the month.
Pretty
But,
much.
what I hear you saying, which I think is so key, is on the debt side is to expense side, look at your expenses. You can't do everything all at once, but make small changes. Um, example for me, I love coffee in the morning. And my wife's like, "Well, bring it from home." I'm like, "I don't want to bring it from home." But what I did do to save money is I switched coffee shops and I went to a place that will give me a free refill. So a little shout out to Taste of Rome. So hey, in San Francisco, that saves me 3-4 bucks a day on it. So I hear you saying that, making the small expenses, and don't avoid it. Look at your spending. And on the income side, yeah, maybe you're not going to get a new raise right now, but be intentional with that money, right? And putting it towards against the debt if you can. So, I mean, that is such great advice. I want to switch gears a little bit to like the organization, company side.
Mhm.
Where does responsibility fall, Michael? Is it fall solely on the employer to make sure that people aren't getting burnt out? Do the employees share a lot of the responsibility there? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's both. I know there's a lot of finger pointing, and we've seen the stats. Gallup just released a report, I think it was last week, said 21% of employees are engaged. So that means 8 out of 10 employees
Not a
um,
lot.
are checked out. And of those, 80% that are checked out, there's, I think, roughly 20% of those people are really toxic and they are poisoning the pot and, bad mouthing the organization any which way they can. And that, of course, causes a ripple effect. And that's why productivity suffers. That's why the products and services that we buy could suffer because people are just not there. And there's a lot of reasons behind it. I think all the things we've talked about before, the pandemic and the unaddressed trauma that caused businesses, individuals. There's still a lot of people that have not worked through that traumatic experience. And there's no other way to paint it. It was a traumatic experience. People were impacted in different ways, but a lot of people have not worked through that, and that carries forward. Secondly, the economics of things. Businesses are, we got to get more out of our people. We got to do this, and not understanding, okay, well, do our people have everything they need to be successful? And that should be priority one of every organization. Yes, serving the customer, making the best product or service, of course, very important. You have to set up your team for success. If a baseball team does not put the best players on the field and have a good management team, system, equipment, you name it, if they don't make that possible, the likelihood of that team being successful is very, very low. And we see it. Yes, there's those anomalies where the low budget team one year just happens to hit the right notes, to get the right combination of players and they win, but you have to invest in your people. And sometimes they say, well, we don't have the budget for that. It's like, I didn't say anything about spending money. It's like create an environment for them to thrive. Understand what do they need, from a communication standpoint. What resources do they need? How do we communicate with each other? And it was such a missed opportunity for so many organizations during the pandemic, especially the early days when most of us were sent home. We had to figure out how to use Zoom or Teams or other things. And unfortunately, many organizations didn't take that further to go, okay, let's leverage this to figure out where are the silos that we have built either by design or just by accident. What can we do to break those things out to improve the flow of information and also make sure that our teams have everything they need to do their job well? Because if you hire somebody, my hope is that you want them to be successful. If they're really good at their job, that means the things that the team makes is going to be better, which means the company is going to be able to thrive. And a stat I share all the time, 52% of the Fortune 500 companies from the year 2000 are either gone or were acquired. So over half of them, 25 years ago, top 500 companies publicly traded on the planet gone. And so, and we've also seen the same percentage, which I find really ironic. 52% of the online companies that were birthed in the year 2020 are gone. So, which doesn't surprise me as much because startups, as you know, most of them don't make it because of a variety of different reasons. But where I'm getting at with this is organizations need to do a better job of investing in their people. And by investing, I mean understanding what they need to do their job really well, being there for them, making sure you're as clear as possible on what you need them to do, and get out of their way and let them do it. And too many managers, especially the new ones that were never properly trained on how to manage people, they don't know what they're doing. And it's not necessarily their fault. They were kind of set up to fail in many cases because they were really good at working in this department. They know everything about it. They can manage this department. No, maybe not, because they don't know how to manage people. And I think that's the biggest thing is understanding how to manage people.
One of the things I heard you speak about, which really lit up my ears, and because I'm in the learning and development world, and I'm not saying you have to always pay for formal training, but you've spoken about how giving people learning opportunities actually reduces burnout because they feel better about themselves. Am I right about that?
Oh, most definitely. I encourage people and organizations for that matter, leverage YouTube University. Like for example, going back to somebody that's struggling financially and they're not going to get any more money from work in your time. And this is where scheduling your time comes in really important. Allocate some time to learn some new skills. It's not difficult to figure out, okay, what skills are in demand. Open up Google or Chat GPT. What skills are in demand in San Francisco in April 2025? It's going to give you a list. Okay, give me a link to YouTube videos that can train me on all this. Click them, bookmark them, start watching them. You learn how to do everything else. You can learn a new skill. Doesn't matter what age you are. If those skills are in demand and they need them, learn them. Practice it. It's like, well, I can't find a job because I'm so brand new. Okay, well, this is where volunteering can come in. There's going to be a lot of nonprofit organizations that need that type of expertise, but they don't have the funding in order to do it. So guess what? You get to say, you know what? I'm going to offer it pro bono, do whatever, sort out something, help them out, build them up a little bit, build up your portfolio of work. And then guess what? You get to do that. Now for your employees, training them and investing in them is so critically important. And again, if you can afford to allocate some resources to train them on how to be a manager or conflict resolution or crisis intervention training at organization I worked with years ago, we were in a vulnerable area, lots of crime, lots of problems. So the staff went through like 2 or 3 day training. I was fortunate enough to be trained to be a trainer. So I went through 8 days of crisis intervention training, and I'll never forget this exercise. So one of the things that, they teach you is if someone grabs your throat and, how do you break out of that? So they paired me up with this wonderful saint of a human being. His name's Harjeet. Harjeet is a good 1.5 feet taller than me. Okay. So he's like, all right, you know, Mike, go after Harjeet. So I'm like this. I'm 6 feet tall. So I'm like this. And everybody's laughing. And, they said, okay, Harjeet, break it. And he goes, and of course, the leverage of it, much like Obi-Wan, he had the high ground. So I was like, and thankfully I didn't burn up in flames for those like Star Wars. You'll get that reference. But again, training your people and finding out. One of the things I did when I worked the last healthcare organization I ran that had huge problems and turnover before I started, and I cleaned all that up. One of the things that I did was I worked with the entire team, like, okay, professional development. I'm a big fan of it. I think you need to continue to grow and learn new things. What are some things that you would like to learn more about that are applicable to here that would benefit our patients? And they all came up with ideas, and we budgeted it out and rotated it out. And all of a sudden they gained new skills, got better, new offerings, helped the community with some things that they had learned. They were excited because they were able to help people. All he did was say, "Okay, we're gonna spend $1,500 for you to go to this course." So,
And, for the employers, a couple things there is allow people to have time during the workday to do the learning. Don't expect them to do it on their own, because then you're just adding more stress to them because they're feeling like, oh, I got to do this in the evening and I have to do this, and get my work done in the day. I think you just need to add it into their schedule. That's part of their life balance in there. And then the other thing I really want to point out is, and I've heard you speak about this as well, is the type of cultures that have a burnout culture are the ones where people feel like it's more of a paycheck. Come in, get your paycheck, versus having purpose and belonging in an organization. And I think when you invest in your people, and you could elaborate on this, I think when you invest in your people, people feel like they belong more and they have more of a purpose, which will reduce the burnout. Is that about right?
oh yeah, and actually, I heard there was a segment on. Oh, actually, I think it was a John Maxwell audiobook, the 21 Laws of Leadership. I was listening to that during my morning walk this morning, and he had mentioned Costco, the warehouse club, and how their CEO, and we're not going to talk about how they keep the $1.50 hot dog price and all that stuff, but he's one of the. That's because they own the hot dog factory. They they it's an accounting entry. Don't worry about it. That's how they do it.
I'm a big fan. Hey, I've had my fair share of the Costco
Yeah,
$1.50 hot
yeah,
dogs. So
yeah. I have
it's
to.
not.
I will have them every once in a while because I don't want to see that cardiologist again. But not that that would necessarily do it. It's you think there's certain foods that'll do it, but it could be something else, or in my case, genetics. It just I picked the wrong cards on that, but one of the things that Costco does is they have the lowest turnover rate of any retail entity out there of that scope. Why? Because they pay their employees more. They have better benefits. They educate them constantly. You go into any Costco warehouse, the majority of them that I've ever been in, pretty much the same kind of layout, but also I observe, just because the type of work that I do, I observe how the interactions are with the staff and the management and all that. And 99% of the time I've seen in there, the managers are in there and they're like, yeah, they may have to give them a little pep talk, but kind of like, a manager, giving the player, a little bit of heat, but like, figuratively in this case, smacking them on the butt and going, you got this. Come on. You know that you're better than that. Come on, let's do this. Same kind of, situation where they're encouraging them. They're holding them accountable for what they did, but they're also encouraging them to be better. And they know they could do it. And they're infusing in them, I know you can be better. You know you can be better at this. You can do this. You got this. What can I do to help you? And that is the normal mode in the organizations that are thriving and that are doing well is, they're not covering up mistakes. No, it's a learning opportunity and investing in them and understanding the situations, especially now with the economy the way it is. Okay, what can we do as an employer? And we can't give them raises. What can we do? Where do we have some elbow room somewhere? Can we maybe switch the insurance so they have a lower copay, or maybe we, allocate this a company. For example, here's a real life example. A company I was helping out many years ago. There was one of their key employees that was all of a sudden started calling in sick, and they're like, "What's going on?" And they finally said, "Well, I'm going through a divorce." I'm like, okay. And what was happening is they were calling in sick so they could go to the attorney's office and do all the things that you get to do when you go through that wonderful process. So the employer went, okay, m- maybe do this. Why don't we cut down your work shifts to 4 days a week or 4 days every other week? How often you need to meet with the attorney? And they figured it out. It's like, okay, we can do one of two things. One, those 4 days, you can work extra hours on those days to make it up, and then you have this dedicated day every week or every other week. That's when you book your appointments with the attorney. That way you can do it. You're not missing work. You don't have to think about work. You can focus on that. And they worked that out. Performance returned to what it was before. Actually, it was probably a little bit better because she wasn't stressing out as much. She was able to get through a painful life experience, but her employer had her back. And when you're going through any traumatic thing, when you have people that have your back is a game changer. And I think in many cases, kind of bring it back into the burnout side of things. In many cases, people that are burned out, they don't sense or feel that anybody has their back. And I think that's a big part of why they stay in those situations as long as they do.
And I think that I mean, you hit it right there. People want leaders, managers who they trust, who have their back. And you talked about learning from failures. One of my favorite guests of all time is a guy named Gary Ridge. I don't know if you ever had him on your show, WD-40, and he talks about learning moments. You turn those failures into learning moments and growth opportunities. It's so key. A lot of our listeners are high performers. Let's say they're all-star employees. That's why they're learning and growing, listening to podcasts. But let's help them a little bit, Michael, with boundaries, because you know what happens to high performers, and I've been guilty of this myself. Let's say you have two people on your team, and one person constantly hits deadlines, gets things done quicker. They're a pleasure to work with, and one person, it's the opposite. So what do? You keep piling stuff on the top performer. Let's put ourselves in the top performer's shoes. How do you help somebody in that position to help set boundaries with their leader?
Yeah, setting boundaries in a situation that you're already in is definitely more challenging than like in my situation when I took on that new role. I said, okay, let's establish the boundaries. It's easier to set it at the beginning. That's when it's like, okay, you're in negotiation stage, so they get it. Then that way it's set. But in these situations, and I see it all the time, people that delegate, they're really good at delegation. In many cases, those people that are awesome at delegating are horrible at keeping track of what they've delegated. So that all of a sudden they say, okay, let's look at this. And all of a sudden they go, all right, of these 15 projects, we've got 3 people in a department. Mandy's got 12. Not good. So you have to look at it and say, okay, these other 2 people, why aren't we giving them to them? Well, they're slow on deadlines and this. Okay, well, you know what? This is where the training or mentoring can come in. Maybe you say, okay, of the 12 that Mandy's doing, we're going to peel back half of them and we're going to split them up to the other 2 people that aren't as good and maybe a little bit more. But then see if Mandy is interested. This is a coaching opportunity for Mandy as well. Say, okay, Mandy, can you kind of side mentor, one of these, and the organization would set it up. We're not just say, teach them how you work. No, that's not going to work. It's like, okay, let's figure out workflows, because how Mandy works and how Mandy gets things done is not the same that Josh is going to be able to do or Alex is going to do. You have to understand how people work, how their workflow is, and give them the autonomy to be able to do it. To make sure they have all the tools they need, give them the deadlines, when's it due, have the check-in points, and let them do it. If they're running behind, figure out why. Why are they running behind? It could be maybe they don't have clarity on some things, or maybe they're just not good at that type of work. Maybe they're a full-time caregiver for their mom, and that's taxing. There's external and internal ingredients that are at play here, but I think organizations that are healthier understand, without getting into the granular details of what's going on in people's lives, but at least if they know there's something going on, they can have a little bit of leeway on things. But again, you want to set up your people for success, but not, have a situation like Mandy, for example, where you overload her to the point where she burns out or she quits. Like, you know what?
And she leaves.
Yeah, she leaves. And we go, why? How can we lose somebody so good? Because you overworked them. So
Yeah.
it's important for you, one, as a leader, to delegate, think, and give it as growth opportunities for your teams, but also delegate it in a way where they can be successful. And quite frankly, there may be some things you delegate because they're better at it than you. And I know that's an ego hit. I don't want to hurt your feelings too much, but in many cases, leaders, their egos are a little sensitive when they have an employee that is better than them at something. The fear kicks in, they're going to take my job. Well, then go find another job. Don't worry about that. You don't even know if they want your job. They may just want to do something and then eventually, maybe go into a different sector. Who knows? We don't know that. Set them up for success. And even to the point, I'm glad I mentioned that, even the point where they may want to go into a different sector, understand the career path that your employees want. Don't think that they're going to stay there forever. You're delusional if you think that. No one does that. It's so rare to see anybody stay in an organization for a long period of time. It's very rare. It's not the 25 years gold watch mentality. That's been gone for a long time. People are there 2, 3, 5 years, maybe less, really depends. If you're a toxic place, hopefully they're not there long and they wisen up and find someplace else. But unfortunately, there's so many quote unquote toxic places out there that people are just bouncing around because, like, okay, I'm going to stay there until I can't take it. Then I'm going to go on somewhere else, which is no way to work.
Yeah, and what I wanna piggyback on that is, for an all-star employee who maybe is getting overloaded and isn't comfortable with, setting boundaries, they need to have a conversation with their leader and just point things out because, Michael, the grass isn't greener on the other side all the time, and like you just mentioned, there's all these toxic places out there. Well, maybe have a conversation instead of passing up a better, going someplace else, to maybe set those boundaries for yourself, which I think is so important. But you're right. I mean, there are leaders need to do a better job of being aware of that when they're overloading their employees, because otherwise they're going to lose great employees. But the employees got to take some ownership of it themselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They have to. And a lot of people will say, well, how do I tell my boss that I'm overworked? Because I don't want to lose my job. It's like, well, you frame it. And this is one way to do it. And just basically say, okay, boss, I love working here. That might be a lie, but start with that. I want to do a great job. Hopefully that's not a lie. Here are all the things that I'm working on right now. And you could get, the boardroom table, spread it all out. Might be a little overwhelming if the leader recognizes, oh my, I've just basically murdered my employee here by assigning all this work to them. And you basically say, I need your help. So that all of a sudden that's kind of quite frankly, an ego boost to leader. I need your help. So leader goes, ooh, I could be of service. Great. I need your help to help me reprioritize what I need to work on first, because as much as I would love to, I can't work on all of these things at once. I want to do a great job. And if I'm trying to work on all these things at once, I'm concerned that I'm not going to meet deadlines or deliver things as best as I could. Hopefully the manager will look at that and go, okay, there's way too much here. Okay, let's allocate this off to other people or put this on hold, whatever. And so they get that awareness, because again, a lot of times we just delegate. We don't have any type of tracking mechanism as a leader of how much we've delegated. So that's something leaders need to really work on. And there's systems in play, and there's all kinds of things you can do with technology and software and all that stuff. But don't just load up on a bunch of tools to try to manage people, because then all of a sudden you have people logging into 15 different protocols, and
That's a whole nother mess.
that is a big mess too. It's like, pick a couple. Hopefully they can kind of communicate with each other a little bit, and because otherwise you're literally, it's like, okay, I need a screwdriver to tighten this bolt or this screw. Okay. Well, here's the tool bag that has 600 tools from Home Depot. You have to carry this with you everywhere because we use all these tools. So carry that with you to go. No, it's so you got to get smarter on that. And I know, some people get really passionate about the different software tools and all of that. It's like, okay, what helps you run your business? Use that.
Absolutely. Michael, we're coming up on time. Had a great conversation about a lot. What is one more thing you'd like to leave our audience with about a burnout?
Going back to the sleep thing, and hopefully we didn't put you to sleep during this conversation, but if we did, you probably needed the nap. But sleep is so critically important, and set up your sleeping room. Hopefully it's a bedroom, or if you're in a studio or sleeping on somebody's couch, whatever the case may be. Um, Set it up to be ideal, the right temperature for you, darken out the room, keep technology out of the bedroom if all possible. They still sell alarm clocks. You can buy them. Don't use your smartphone as an alarm clock. I know it has the alarms on them, don't use it, because the temptation of looking at the phone at all hours, that blue light from there, tricks your brain into thinking it's time to be awake. So put away that stuff, you know, invest your money in the best pillow, bedding, sheets, mattress that you can afford. Because I ask people, have you ever gone to a luxury hotel or on a cruise or something like that? And I ask them, what was the bed like? How does it? Oh, it's the best experience ever. You can buy those beds and have it at home. So that,
It's the investment.
oh, it is. Where do you spend the most consecutive hours of your day in one spot? It's where you sleep. So give yourself a fighting chance to have the best night's sleep. When you do that, you wake up refreshed. You're not, in all likelihood, like myself, most of the time, I wake up before an alarm goes off. I wake up, and I'm not because I'm like, I wake up because my body says, okay, I've had enough. Let's go ahead and get started. And it's a much better ideal and way to wake up. So focus on your sleep, and setting up your room for success. If you do that, it's going to give you a fighting chance to reduce the stress, which of course, prolonged stress turns into burnout.
Well, and I'm really glad that we kind of wrapped it up with sleep, because that is something that is so key and will affect everything about, mental and physically. So thank you for that. To kind of recap what we talked about that burnout could actually be, or is actually, a choice that you have, especially if are you going to be a victim or you're going to take ownership of it. You shared your story about how you took ownership of it, which is awesome. We talked about the main causes of burnout, really: financial, nutrition, sleep, all of that. And we talked about thriving workforces versus not thriving workforces, and the importance of investing in your people, and how that could really help. And also, another thing that's really important when it comes to burnout, again, which you're big on, is small, consistent changes. We talked about that, whether it's around financial or eating differently, and also boundaries and where they set in. Both employers need to figure out how to help their team do that, but also you got to take it upon yourself and set your own boundaries. So, Michael, thank you so much. I know that you're going to offer, we got a link in there for a free copy of your book, The Burnout-Proof. So that's one thing I wanted to make sure we highlighted and we didn't forget, which is awesome. I actually went through and read it. So there's so many good things in there. And but where else would you like our listeners to connect with you at?
Yeah, best place is just go to breakfastleadership.com, and there's links to YouTube videos, the podcast show, articles that we write, all kinds of different things. I'm on most of the social media channels. Just look up the letter B and then Fast Leadership. Do not put that on a license plate. That will get you a visit by your favorite local police agencies. You don't want to meet them in that capacity. That gets pricey really quick. But breakfastleadership.com is probably the best place to start.
Well, thank you, Michael. And listeners, I want you to do me a favor. Whether if one of these things stuck with you, like if you're super stressed about finances, or you're going through burnout, you don't know what to do, reach out to Michael. Or, as important, if there's a coworker or a friend who's really struggling, send them this episode. It'll be something they could learn from and get great value out of. And until next time, everybody, do me a favor, stay curious, keep learning, and have a great day. Thank you, Michael. You're awesome.
Just getting into the data-driven decision-making and measurement framework, that was not something the business was doing before, which is fine, right? They were focused on getting the next